What is in a portrait? Is it the likeness captured within it? Is it the use of lighting and mood to evoke emotion within you? Is it just getting to make your funky little guys and expression charts? Whatever you consider it to be their merit, portraits are an incredibly popular drawing subject. It doesn't matter where your experience lies, the process of drawing a head will test your understanding of the fundamentals. Want to get better at that? Let's talk about it. Now, you might say, I don't know what you're talking about. How'd you get in my house? And I say, we can start with the basics and walk you through my process of drawing character portraits. And, oh, I'm in your walls. Let's get started. Heads, like most things, are a three-dimensional object. When working in a 2D space like a drawing, it's important to remember the amount of space the full shape takes up. We can iron out and see how to place facial features by breaking down the head into simple shape. Let's apply this idea of basic shapes to the base of the head. Here's a basic head shape broken into color-coded segmented planes. These can be applied at any camera angle and either obscured or accentuated by foreshortening. What I like to do is create center lines to see the midpoint of these planes, and create consistency between angles. From here, I create a wireframe that is modified for what is called the Loomis method of construction. The Loomis method is good for starting out, but it's rigid in variability, so I'm going to show you how I adapted it for my own preferences. It looks kind of like this. Now is when things get interesting. This structure doesn't exist in isolation. It's modeled after our own heads, so it's possible to overlay this wireframe structure over real photographs of people. This is for what is called capturing likeness. Studying pictures of real people's faces can help you mentally note the uniqueness of their facial structures. Faces are complex and beautiful in many ways, and are almost never fully symmetrical or identical to another in most cases. Being able to not only study the face, but to practice drawing those features is incredible practice for understanding your form. You can also study the mood created with lighting and angles paired with expressions. This can make a face sharp and intimidating, or softened and welcoming. It can make the same grin either endearing or unhinged. I really recommend taking time to practice drawing some simplified expressions every day, and also breaking down facial features from photos you can find. It's great practice and improves your skills by a lot. When you have your sketch created and you're ready to move forward, it's a good time to take a second to consider your subject. Let's start by creating a layer of white below our lines. I use this as a visual boundary between the colors and the background so that I can see where I'm working better. I then make a folder called Colors and place that base layer inside. I create a new layer for every section I'd like to fill in, and label them. Here's my general layer division configuration. Take note that I start with the head, face, eyes, hair, and then any accessories or extra details. I should take some time to explain how I pick my colors. Local color is the natural hue and saturation that a surface takes up in average lighting. What I do is pick what I consider to be the local color, and then create a layer set as a clipping group to the layer with a local color. These clipping groups are where I apply shading, lighting, and any hue shifts I want to use for taste. Skin is incredibly complex. There is a large spectrum of natural hues and vibrancies it can take, and each skin tone can respond to light differently. It's better to look up visual references to see how light is absorbed or reflected on skin, and the person's complexion. Plenty of people online have created visual guides on how to pick colors from your color wheel, and also to find skin tone palettes that are easy to pick from with the eyedropper tool. I suggest looking at the Flesh Cubes chart made by Puppsicle over on Twitter. I'll put the links down below for both the chart and their card. This is when I start adding in more subtle details. When working on a portrait, we can make use of subtle hue shifts on a person's face to create a lot more visual depth. If you look at your own complexion closely in natural light, you'll notice some sections of your face are actually cooler or warmer. This is because of how our blood vessels are located. If you've used makeup before, like a blush or a highlighter, you kind of already know how this works. Let's take a look at a general color map we can apply to faces, and how this makes your portraits look a lot more alive. I'm going to show you an example of a bust here in two states. One without our added color map, and one with this map turned on. See the difference? Our cheeks and nose have more warmth, and the jaw and chin have new depth. Generally, where there's less light being caught on the face is where you'll see cooler tones, like here in the mouth corners. Now you can also just make use of all sides of the previously mentioned flesh cubes, but I personally like to apply both in combination. I think the results are more lifelike. Shading and lighting is relatively straightforward. It's about knowing where the light is being cast on our subject and how it will scatter. Sharper edges and lighting can create focal points because of the strong contrast between tones, and will create darker shadows. Play with the warmth and coolness of tones as well. It can make something more dramatic or calm. I use whatever tone I find appropriate to the piece and apply a broad stroke over a large portion of the canvas. And then slowly, I carve away at some shapes. Then I blend with either erasing or adding back in form over smaller sections. If you're having issues with some steps, that's okay. Let's go over some common mistakes made by even seasoned artists sometimes. Something feel off anatomy-wise? Flip your canvas. Flip your canvas. Do it. Seriously, check your work constantly. It's so critical to boosting your quality of work. Press this little icon on your navigator plane here to flip your working area horizontally, and also with options for vertical flips and view rotations. When working in Clip Studio Paint, you have a variety of options of how to fill in your colors. Sometimes when you color though, you can end up with some stray marks outside of your lines. This is where reference layers come in. Clip Studio Paint has a special feature called reference layers that can be toggled on or off for both layers and tools. When this is on, your tools will behave and work within these spaces defined by your set reference layer. To set a reference layer, select whichever layer you want it to be. In this case, it will be the line work. And click this little lighthouse icon right here. This is now your reference layer and can be turned off and on at any time. You can also set folders to be referenced as well, in case you need multiple reference layers at once. I go to my eraser tool and make sure it's checked on to refer to reference layers, and it will erase only what's outside of the line work here. That stray mark is gone, and the rest of my color fill is safe. I sometimes use a large brush, fill in my canvas, and then use reference layers and my eraser to remove everything outside of the line art to make my base layer. I do this just to make sure that my base layer has no gaps. This can also be used with a paint bucket tool. It can be pretty handy when paired with two other tool settings: area scaling and tolerance. Area scaling works by adding extra pixels around the perimeter of your fill. And tolerance affects how much your paint bucket will fill in the first place. Turning up the tolerance a bit will account for ghost pixels being left from anti-aliasing. Having the tolerance up too high though, and it would have your fill go past where you want it. So it's worth tweaking it as you go. Are your colors looking off? Sometimes it's hard to tell what's wrong, but I have a couple of ways of checking to see what's not working in mine. To create a new layer, and then fill it entirely with a gray. Then I set that layer type to hue. This will turn your colors to be grayscale, and let you see what's throwing off the balance. Is there a darker tone in a spot that messes with your contrast? Or maybe something is too bright. From here, you use hue adjustments to tweak the brightness, saturation, and hue of that layer. Additionally, if you feel like your colors have no harmony, you can create a layer above your color folder and set it to clip to that folder. You can fill it in with the color of your choice and play with the blending mode and opacity to add a connecting tone that can bring your colors together. I like to set mine to overlay or hue and then turn down the opacity to below half, but sometimes I like to experiment. I usually end up with some pretty interesting results. I use this sometimes to make things just a bit more appealing. Another mistake I see artists make sometimes is that line work ends up looking flat. And that's because they kept it a solid black. While that can work stylistically, it has to be an intentional choice and not just a casual oversight. Find this icon here to lock the transparent pixels in a layer. This means you can only draw on your lines. From here, take brushes and experiment with what colors look appealing for your lines. I like to use dark, heavily saturated lines that are close in hue to surrounding colors. After playing with layer effects, some texturing, and some decorative framing, here is the portrait that I made. She's not anyone specific, but maybe we can name her together. If you have any ideas on what this character could be like, write it down below in the comments. That'll be it for this video, but this is the start of a series I'm calling the Sketchy Starter Pack, where we'll be going over drawing fundamentals, basic anatomy from head to toe, drawing from life, and creating interesting compositions. There's always room for another sketch, so come join me, and subscribe for more future content. Hit the bell so you'll be notified when a new video comes out, and I'll see you next time. Bye!